No, alarms sounded when the galaxy made its greatest mistake. No fleets moved. No weapons fired. Instead, the chamber of the Galactic Council erupted in laughter. Because a human had just issued a warning. And the most powerful empires in the galaxy thought it was a joke. The council chamber was the political heart of the interstellar community. Hundreds of species had gathered. Towering crystalline minds, ancient hive intelligences, aristocratic star empires whose histories stretch back 10,000 years. And standing among them was a single human, Ambassador Elias Ward. No armor, no escort fleet, just a quiet man in a dark uniform. Yet the tension around him felt heavier than gravity. Ward rested both hands on the speaking platform and looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes, or equivalent organs, of every delegate present. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We do not want conflict," he said. The translation, orbs carried his words across the chamber. "But humanity will not be threatened." A ripple passed through the delegates. Some scoffed. Some leaned back in amusement. One of the ancient council speakers, a being whose skin resembled polished stone, tilted forward on its floating throne. "Clarify your statement, human." Ward didn't hesitate. "If your empires continue encroaching on our systems, if your fleets continue testing our borders, then understand this." He paused. The silence sharpened. "We will respond." For a moment, the chamber stayed quiet. Then the laughter began. Low at first, then spreading. Massive insectoid nobles clicked their mandibles in amusement. Tall, silver diplomats whispered to one another. To them, humanity was a curiosity, a young species, a noisy species, a species that had only recently joined the interstellar stage. They saw humans as reckless, emotional, fragile, the kind of civilization that burned brightly for a century and then disappeared. What could Earth possibly do against empires older than its entire history? One reptilian warlord leaned toward his microphone. "You presume much, human." Another delegate chuckled. "Your species has barely left its cradle." More laughter. Ward did not react, but in a dark corner of the chamber, several silent observers watched closely. They did not laugh, because they had seen human fleets fight. They had studied Earth's wars. They knew something the Council refused to understand. Humans did not bluff, and when pushed, humans did not fight like anyone else in the galaxy. Ambassador Ward gave the chamber one final look. Then he spoke 6 words that would haunt the galaxy forever. "You were warned. Remember that." And 3 months later, the first empire disappeared. 3 months. That was all it took for the galaxy to realize the human ambassador had not been making empty threats. But by then, it was already too late. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Zylar Dominion, one of the oldest military empires in the known galaxy. Their fleets controlled entire sectors. Their warships had crushed dozens of civilizations long before humanity had even discovered radio. To them, Earth had always been a nuisance, a loud, stubborn newcomer refusing to accept its place. So when Ambassador Ward issued his warning, the Zylar War Council laughed harder than anyone. And then they sent a fleet. 27 warships crossed into the outer edge of human-controlled territory. Officially, it was a navigation exercise. Unofficially, it was a message, a show of dominance, a reminder that young species did not get to challenge ancient powers. But the humans didn't respond with threats. They didn't even respond with ships. Instead, they went silent. No diplomatic protests. No military mobilization. Just silence. For weeks, the Zylar fleet moved deeper into the disputed system. Their commanders grew bolder with every passing day. Patrol routes expanded. Mining drones appeared near human asteroid stations. Still nothing from Earth. Inside the Galactic Council, delegates mocked humanity openly. Perhaps the humans realized their mistake. Typical emotional species. They bark loudly then retreat. But the few species who had fought humans before began to feel uneasy. Because humanity had a pattern. When humans argued loudly, they were still deciding. But When humans went quiet, it meant the decision had already been made. Then it happened, without warning, without a declaration of war, without even a signal. Every ship in the Zylar fleet vanished, not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. 27 battleships. For carriers, nearly 80,000 crew, gone in less than 3 seconds. Their final transmissions reached the Dominion capital hours later. Confused, panicked, sensors had detected something impossible. Not a fleet, not a weapon, but space itself folding. Gravity spikes, energy readings off the charts. And then, nothing. The Dominion command believed it was a malfunction, a cosmic anomaly, until the same thing happened again. And this time, it happened inside Zylar territory. Entire military stations disappeared. Shipyards collapsed into glowing voids. Planetary defense grids blinked out of existence. Not explosions, not battles. Erasure. Clean, precise, terrifying. Across the galaxy, intelligence networks scrambled to understand what was happening. But the truth would soon become horrifyingly clear. Humanity had not built bigger weapons. They had built something far worse. And when the Galactic Council finally learned what it was, even the ancient empires began to panic. The first panic began quietly, not with screams, not with war, but with a single classified report placed on the Galactic Council's central table. The report came from a species known as the Tyran Collective, a civilization famous for studying the physics of space itself. Their scientists rarely spoke in absolutes, but this report contained a sentence that froze the entire chamber. Humanity has weaponized space-time. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the arguments began. That is impossible. No civilization has ever achieved that level of gravitational manipulation. Even the ancients failed. But the evidence was impossible to ignore. Every vanished Zylar fleet, every erased shipyard, every missing station, all shared the same signature. Localized space-time collapse. Not a bomb, not an energy weapon, but a controlled fold in reality itself. The Tyran scientist presenting the report pointed to the holographic display. Observe the gravitational readings. The image zoomed in on the moment the Zylar fleet disappeared. Space twisted, compressed, then snapped back into place. The result? Everything inside that region was crushed into nothing smaller than a molecule. Ships, crew, metal, atmosphere, gone. A cold silence filled the council chamber. Because everyone suddenly understood something horrifying. Humanity had not been trying to build stronger weapons. They had been studying gravity, warp travel, singularities, and now they could turn those discoveries into weapons. Weapons that didn't fire lasers, weapons that didn't leave wreckage, weapons that simply removed enemies from existence. One council delegate whispered the question everyone was thinking, how many do they have? No one answered, but a new transmission suddenly appeared in the center of the chamber. Human encryption, human origin, Ambassador Elias Ward, the same calm man who had stood in this chamber 3 months earlier. His image flickered into view. He looked exactly the same. Same calm expression, same steady eyes. But now, no one laughed. Ward spoke quietly. You have noticed our response. No one interrupted. You crossed our borders. You threatened our colonies. You tested our patience. He paused, and we warned you. The council speaker leaned forward slowly. Humanity, what exactly have you created? Ward looked directly at the chamber. Insurance. A chill spread across the delegates. Ward continued. Humanity calls it the gravitational collapse system. He gestured behind him, revealing a holographic map of the galaxy. Hundreds of faint markers appeared. Council members stared in disbelief. Ward's voice remained calm. These devices can fold space within a defined radius. He paused, and they are already deployed. The chamber erupted in panic, but Ward raised one finger, and the room fell silent again. Do not misunderstand us. His voice hardened slightly. We still do not want war. Then he delivered the sentence that made several ancient empires feel something they had not felt in centuries: fear. But if you force it, we can remove every hostile fleet in the galaxy before your admirals even issue their first order. And at that moment, the Galactic Council realized something terrifying. Humanity had not joined the galaxy to compete. Humanity had joined to survive. And survival meant one thing: winning. The chamber had hosted 10,000 years of arguments. Empires had risen and fallen within those walls. Wars had been declared. Treaties had been signed. But never, not once, had the Galactic Council fallen completely silent. Until now, hundreds of delegates stared at the holographic map floating behind Ambassador Ward. Hundreds of tiny markers glowed across the stars, each one representing a gravitational collapse device, each one capable of erasing fleets, civilizations, entire battle groups, and, according to the human ambassador, they were already active. The ancient council speaker slowly leaned forward. Its stone-like face showed something rare: concern. You claim these weapons are deployed across interstellar space? Ward nodded once. Yes. Murmurs spread across the chamber, because everyone was doing the same terrifying calculation. If those devices were already hidden throughout the galaxy, then humanity didn't need fleets. They didn't need battles. They didn't even need to invade. All they had to do was press a button. One crystalline diplomat spoke with shaking disbelief. You expect us to believe a young species could secretly place weapons across Council territory? Ward tilted his head slightly. You believed we were fragile. He paused. You stopped watching. Several intelligence officers in the chamber suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Because he wasn't wrong. Human trade ships had moved through countless systems over the past decades. Mining corporations, research expeditions, civilian transport fleets. At the time, everyone assumed humanity was simply expanding. No, one imagined those movements were something else. Preparation. The reptilian warlord who had mocked Ward earlier slammed a clawed hand onto his console. You are threatening the entire galaxy. Ward's response was immediate. No, his voice remained steady. We are preventing war. The warlord hissed. By holding every empire hostage? Ward didn't blink. By ensuring no empire can threaten humanity without consequences. A few delegates exchanged nervous glances, because the strategy was brutally simple. If every aggressive empire risked losing its fleets instantly, then no empire could start a war. One of the quiet observers from the corner finally spoke, a scholar from a species that had once fought humans decades earlier. We warned you, the scholar said softly. The chamber turned toward him. You thought humans were reckless. He shook his head slowly. No, they are patient. The council speaker turned back to Ward. And what of the Zylar Dominion? Ward's eyes hardened slightly. They ignored our warning. The holographic map shifted. One large section of territory flickered, then disappeared. Gasps filled the chamber. Ward spoke again. The Zylar High Command ordered 3 additional fleets to advance toward human systems yesterday. The room went cold, so we removed them. Another part of the map vanished. 400 warships. Gone. Just like the first fleet. The reptilian warlord whispered in disbelief. You destroyed them without a battle. Ward corrected him calmly. We stopped them before a battle. And then he said something that made every empire in the chamber rethink everything they believed about humanity. Humans learned a long time ago, the safest war is the one that never starts. But far away from the council chamber, in the capital of the Zylar Dominion, the emperor had just made a decision, a desperate one, because instead of backing down, the Dominion was about to launch the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen, and humanity was about to prove that their warning was not a bluff. Across the Zylar Dominion, every military shipyard roared to life. Thousands of warships powered up, carrier groups assembled, planetary defense fleets abandoned their posts and rushed toward the staging zones. It was the largest mobilization in Zylar history, because their emperor had reached a simple conclusion. If humanity had scattered hidden weapons across the galaxy, then there was only one solution: destroy Earth before those weapons could be used again. Within hours, hyperspace lanes lit up with traffic. Battleships poured into the assembly sector like a dark metallic storm. Admirals stood on command bridges, watching the tactical displays grow brighter and brighter. Fleet after fleet joined the formation. 10,000 ships, then 15,000, then 20,000. A war armada powerful enough to crush entire civilizations. The Emperor addressed them personally from his throne world. His voice thundered through every ship. Humans believe they can threaten the Dominion. A roar of approval echoed across the fleet channels. They believe hiding weapons makes them powerful. More cheers, but they forget one truth. The Emperor's voice dropped to a cold growl. Numbers win wars. Across the formation, commanders nodded in agreement, because even if humans could erase a few fleets, they couldn't erase all of them. Not a force this size, not this fast. The order was given. The massive armada jumped into hyperspace. Their destination, the Sol system, but light years away on Earth. Human command had already been watching. Deep beneath the mountains of Luna, the United Earth Defense Network tracked every movement. Fleet Admiral Naomi Reyes stood in the central control chamber, staring at the incoming data. 22,000 enemy warships, and still more joining. A young officer spoke nervously. "Admiral, that's the largest invasion fleet ever recorded." Reyes didn't look worried. She just crossed her arms. "They're predictable." Another officer hesitated. "Should we begin evacuation protocols for the outer colonies?" Reyes shook her head. "No." The room turned toward her. "Why not?" Reyes finally allowed herself a small smile. "Because they're making the same mistake everyone else made." The massive tactical display lit up with hundreds of blinking markers. Not ships, devices. The same devices the Council had just learned about. The gravitational collapse network. But the officers noticed something strange. There weren't hundreds anymore. Now, there were thousands. Reyes gave the final order. "Activate the grid." A technician froze. "Admiral, the entire grid?" Reyes nodded calmly. "Yes." The officer swallowed. "That will create a collapse chain reaction across half the sector." Reyes finally looked at the approaching Zylar fleet on the display. 22,000 warships racing toward humanity. She spoke one quiet sentence. "Then they shouldn't have come." Moments later, space itself began to bend. The Zylar armada exited hyperspace in perfect formation. 22,000 warships, carriers the size of cities, dreadnoughts armed with planet-breaking cannons, destroyers forming endless attack lines. To the admirals watching from their command bridges, it was a beautiful sight, an unstoppable force. The Sol system waited ahead, humanity's home. Their fleets prepared for the final strike. Admiral Corvith of the Dominion's First War Fleet stared at the tactical display. "No resistance detected," his sensor officer reported. Corvith smiled. "So, the humans run after all." The armada advanced. Closer, closer. Earth's sun burned brightly in the distance. And still, no human fleet appeared. No defensive line. No desperate counterattack. Just empty space. Some commanders began to laugh. The Emperor had been right. Humans were clever with tricks, but when faced with real power, they folded. Corvith raised his clawed hand. All fleets advanced to attack formation. The order echoed across 22,000 ships, weapons powered, targeting systems locked onto the inner planets. Humanity's home was minutes away. Then, the stars flickered. At first it looked like a sensor glitch, tiny distortions across the tactical map, gravity fluctuations. But then the distortions grew. Ships began reporting strange readings. "Admiral, we're detecting gravitational anomalies." Corvith frowned. "Location?" The officer's voice trembled. "Everywhere." Across the armada, space began to ripple like water. Small distortions formed around individual fleets. Then they connected, like threads forming a massive web. The gravitational collapse network had activated. Thousands of hidden devices triggered simultaneously across the sector, each one bending space, each one amplifying the others. Admiral Corvith's eyes widened. This isn't possible. But it was happening. The entire region of space around the Zylar fleet began compressing. Gravity multiplied. Stars warped. Sensors screamed warnings. Ships tried to jump back to hyperspace, but the distortion made it impossible. One battleship near the front of the formation collapsed inward like crushed metal. Another twisted in half as space-time bent around it. Panic flooded the fleet channels. We're losing ships. Navigation failure. Gravity spike. Entire formations disappeared in flashes of warped light. Not explosions, not battles, just space closing around them, crushing thousands of warships like insects. And in the center of the storm, a transmission appeared. Human origin. Fleet Admiral Naomi Reyes. Her calm voice echoed through every surviving Zylar ship. We warned you. Around her, the gravitational storm intensified. Warships folded into nothing. Carriers collapsed into glowing singularities. Thousands of ships vanished every second. Corvith stared in horror as the once great armada was erased. Humanity had not built a weapon. They had turned the laws of physics against their enemies, and the Zylar Dominion had just flown directly into the trap. Within minutes, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history ceased to exist. When the storm ended, the stars returned to normal. Space fell quiet again. Where 22,000 Zylar warships had once advanced toward Earth, there was now only emptiness. No wreckage, no drifting debris, no survivors, just silent vacuum. Across the galaxy, sensors that had been watching the battle zone struggled to process what had happened. Military observers replayed the data again and again. The result never changed. The entire armada had been erased in less than 9 minutes. Not defeated, not scattered, erased. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere had turned cold. Delegates stared at the new holographic report floating above the central platform. Zylar fleet strength, 0. Remaining warships, none detected. One of the oldest empires in the galaxy had just lost its entire military in a single event. And the terrifying truth was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't destroyed them with overwhelming numbers. Humanity had simply ended the fight before it began. The ancient council speaker slowly activated a communication channel. Contact the human ambassador. Moments later, Ambassador Elias Ward appeared again in the chamber. He looked exactly as calm as the first time he had stood there. But now every delegate listened with complete silence. Ward spoke first. The Zylar Dominion attacked our system with the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. The council speaker nodded slowly. We have seen the results. Ward folded his hands. For the record, humanity did not seek this conflict. He paused briefly. But we will always finish it. No one argued, because the evidence was undeniable. Humans had built something no empire had ever imagined. A defensive network so powerful that war itself became pointless. The council speaker asked the question every civilization now feared. What happens next? Ward answered immediately. Nothing. Confusion spread through the chamber. Ward continued. Humanity has no interest in conquering the galaxy. The delegates leaned closer. We built the collapse network for one reason, to make sure no one ever threatens Earth again. A long silence followed. Finally, the scholar who had warned the council earlier spoke softly. I believe we owe humanity an apology. Several delegates nodded. Because the truth had become impossible to deny. Humanity was not the youngest species anymore. Humanity was the most dangerous, not because they were cruel, not because they wanted war, but because they had learned something every other empire had forgotten. The best way to win a war was to make sure your enemy never dared to start one. And from that day forward, whenever a new civilization joined the Galactic Council, They were given a simple piece of advice. If you encounter humans, respect them, leave their borders alone, and never forget the words spoken before the greatest fleet in history disappeared.